Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, geeks and nerds and ambassadors, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing. It is Monday night, the start of a brand new week, and I am live with you all tonight. And tonight is the Mandalorian mid-season review. We are halfway through season 3 of the Mandalorian, and tonight, if this is your first night to the Ambassador Wing, you've showed up for a good night. You showed up for a good review, a good stream, good discussion. And if this is your first visit, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you share this out with all your friends who are fans of The Mandalorian or Star Wars or just good science fiction in general. And of course, here at the Ambassadorial Wing, just a few things for those of you who may not be familiar. Here, there's no drama. Here, there's no nonsense. Here, there's no BS. Here, there's no infighting or butting of heads per se, except maybe in the jovial manner. Here we discuss, here we debate, here we critique fairly cinema, television, and streaming. And if that's your sort of thing, if that's your sort of deal, if that's your cup of tea, if that's what gets your mojo a-flowing, this is the place to be. So, with all that being said, let's get right into. Oh, I forgot one other thing. Also, here, oftentimes I do open panel. What does that mean? That means I put the link in the chat. So, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Twitch, I don't think I've put the link on Twitch, but I might do that later. If you want to join me for the discussion tonight, the link is right over there in the chat, pinned right up at the tippy top. You click that link, and we can talk Mandalorian. So, anyway, all that being said, let's get right into it. Mandalorian Season 3. Now, I did discuss Episode 1 a few weeks ago on one of my Afternoons with the Ambassador episodes, and I did share my thoughts, so I'll just briefly touch upon Episode 1 of Season 3, and then we'll go further on into the rest of the season thus far. It had a lot of good setup, had some nice action set pieces. We got to see the fact that, yes, there are crocodiles in the Star Wars universe, or, well, at least crocosaurs. That's what I'm going to start calling this thing because we see it again later on the season. I'm going to call this the Mandalorian crocosaur. And I'm just going to say it. You need more than a pea shooter to take on the Mandalorian crocosaur. Because that thing will eat you up in one bite. We know, we saw it. It happened, the whole thing. Thankfully, Mr. Din Djarin came in, blasted it with his neutron pulse ray, and ascended onto the Maker. Or whatever the god is in the Star Wars universe. The Wills. Of course, now, and obviously we got to meet a brand new character. I don't know if we'll see him again this season or going forward. Pirate King Gorian Shard, or as I call him, Mr. Red-Eyed Mosshead. Very, very interesting looking character. And we did see also that Navarro has become less frontiersy, more settled. And we've seen that our one of our favorite reoccurring characters, Grief Karga, played by actor/director Carl Weathers, still has not lost his touch with a blaster by any stretch. So, but with that, we'll move further along into the season with, of course, Episode 2, The Mines of Mandalore. Now, this was a really, and I mean a really action-packed, lore-heavy, whether you consider it official canon or if you consider it Disney Star Wars canon or you consider it new EU canon, has a lot of really cool Easter eggs and a lot of good world building. Of course, we got a reappearance once again. Although I did not think we would see her quite as soon, but I'm not going to say that it's necessarily a bad thing. We got to see Bo-Katan again. Because if you remember at the end of Episode 1, she pretty much tells Din Djarin, the living waters are in the mines. The mines are here. Best of luck to you. Now go away. And of course, Din goes back to, because he couldn't get all the pieces to IG-11 back together again, at least not yet. So he ends up on Tatooine during a certain festival that we first see, of course, in episode 1, The Phantom Menace. That is the Boonta Eve Festival. And we see our favorite mechanic slash junker, Peli Motto, played by Amy Sedaris. And I don't know how I feel about Peli's business model. Having the Jawas strip people's speeders just so that they can be brought in to be repaired by her and the Jawas. I don't know I don't know if that's entirely ethical, but does it mean I entirely just like her as a character? I can't say that I necessarily do, but at the same time I can't say I approve of what she does. But anyway, Din goes to Tatooine. He's like, "Hey, I need a droid." She's like, "Hey, I have a droid." He's like, "I don't want that droid. I want a droid that can actually shoot and take care of itself, not get knocked over on its ass by a strong gust of wind." Granted, Din doesn't actually say that, but comedic effect. And he ends up taking the R5 unit that we've seen numerous times now. I think the R5 unit that we saw in A New Hope, obviously. And I'm gonna say it: when they build droids in the Star Wars universe, they build them to last, or at least they build them to be easily repaired. That little dude's been around since, whew, well, depending on when he was built, actually, and then depending on how long he's been with Peli, he's an old man droid. Let's just put it that way. If he was an actual person, he'd be an old man. But anyhow, obviously, Din takes the droid. They go to Mandalore, and we finally get to see what Mandalore looks like post purge, post the Imperial purge. It's the what the refer to as the Night of a Thousand Tears, and it breaks your heart. I mean, it legitimately does. It breaks your heart to see what the Empire did to Mandalore. And now, granted, we've seen planetary destruction before in the Star Wars universe. We saw it, of course, in A New Hope with the destruction of Alderaan. We saw it in Rogue One with the partial destruction of Jeddah, and of course well, I don't know how we necessarily feel about Scarif per se, because there he was an Imperial world, but regardless. But this wasn't the complete utter obliteration of a planet, as in its complete removal from existence per se. This was the surface being rendered uninhabitable. I mean, the Empire did a number on Mandalore. Of course, what can you expect from the Empire, and particularly from Palpatine? He knew the Mandalorians could be a threat to the Empire, so he was like, "Go smash them." I mean, he pretty much did to them what he was going to do to the Gungans in Episode 1. We saw just how brutal the Empire can be. We've seen it on numerous occasions now. We've seen it in other installments of The Mandalorian. We've seen it obviously in Andor. We saw it in Rogue One. The Empire's brutal. And I think from what I understand, we've even seen how brutal they can be in The Bad Batch. Now, for those who might be wondering, Ambassador, have you been watching The Bad Batch? No. Honestly, I couldn't, after season 1, I just couldn't get into the mindset to watch The Bad Batch again. It's not that I hate it. It's not that I think it's the horriblest thing ever. It's just, it's boring. It's a very, to me, it's a very small corner of the Star Wars universe, and it's one that I don't really have a lot of interest in exploring. Mandalorian, different story entirely. But, it's the obviously Din and Grogu, they get down to the surface. Now, I do want to comment on something else, and that is the Amalekites, I think is what Bo calls them. These are creatures I think we have seen before. I think they were shown in Rebels, or maybe even the Mandalorian centered episodes of the Clone Wars. But they bear resemblance to another character from science fiction, and that is, of course, the Morlocks from the H.G. Wells story, The Time Machine. And for those of you that might not be familiar with the Time Machine, I mean, it's a fairly straightforward story. There's been numerous interpretations of it and anything throughout the years. I mean, obviously, there's the book Wells wrote. There was the, I think, 1950s or 1960s film that was done. I think there was another version done in like the 1970s or 80s, somewhere along in there. And then, of course, there was the early 2000s one with Guy Pearce and Jeremy Irons. And of course, you have the Eloi, the more humanoid looking people and everything, and then you had the Morlocks who lived underground, who did all the grunt work essentially. These creatures that Din and Bo and everything fight and everything, once they land on Mandalore and they go underground, they bear very resemblance to the Morlocks, and I think that was honestly intentional, considering the state of Mandalore at this point, because Bo makes the comment, these are creatures that lived in the wasteland outside of our cities and our settlements and everything. They didn't come in around our area because, well, they would get killed pretty easily. And of course, once again, we see. Now, I'm going to comment on something and everything, and this is something I have noticed because I've watched these 3 times now. Din is still having trouble handling this. Is still having trouble handling the dark saber. But I don't know, for those of you who noticed, those of you who watched and anything, the Minds of Mandalore episode, correct me if I'm wrong, whether it's in the chat or in the comments later after this, after I'm done. Bo seems to have an easier time handling the dark saber than Din does. I'm not entirely sure why, but there's something going on there. Now, obviously, we have the episode in the book towards the end of the book of Boba Fett, where the armorer is trying to train Din on how to use the dark saber, and he's not good at it. He's just plain flat damn not good at it. And the case is true here too. It keeps weighing down on him. Now, this is going to get a little trippy and everything, a little hinky here. But unless I'm mistaken, the dark saber functions pretty much in the same way that a lightsaber does. That means it has a kyber crystal to it, unless I'm mistaken. And if what the lore is true, or what is said, the lore regarding kyber crystals is true, and the darksaber does have a kyber crystal inside of it, then the kyber crystal itself has its own will, quote unquote. I'm wondering if this kyber crystal is fighting against Din. Well, no, because that doesn't make sense either, because he doesn't have a whole lot of trouble because in the fight at the end of season 2, when he's going against Mike using the dark saber, then wait a minute, no, because he doesn't have the dark saber at that point. He does. Gideon's using it, and Gideon doesn't have a whole lot of trouble using it. Bo doesn't have a whole lot of trouble using it. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with Din himself and why the dark saber doesn't want to obey him. Call me crazy, but it just, because when Bo's going in to rescue rescue creature in just a minute, because I got a few things to say about that big mechanical monstrosity. She doesn't have any problem using the dark saber then either. She's slicing through that thing, that big mechanical monstrosity like it's butter. She's sliding underneath it. She's slicing its underbelly and all like this, and it's not weighing her down. She's not having to fight to control the dark saber. So I'm just wondering what's going on there with the dark saber and Denjarin. I really do. And don't worry, we will get to Grogu and all his little antics and shenanigans in the episodes 2 and 4 and everything here momentarily. But I honestly am wondering if there's something wrong with Den that the dark saber is picking up on that's not allowing him to control it easily as it is for everybody else. And I don't have a but just there's enough circumstantial evidence here to say, yeah, there's something seriously wrong with Din using the darksaber. Like it's almost not meant for him. And if that's the case, then who is it meant for? And I have a couple of ideas, but we'll get into that later. We'll get to that after we get through all the discussion on all the episodes. Anyway, back to Mines of Mandalore. Obviously, Grogu escapes, goes back to Kalevala, to where Bo's castle is. This castle, it's cool looking. I'd want to live there. I might redecorate it a little bit, but I'd live there because it's got a nice view. You're surrounded by you got a nice view of the ocean. You got a nice view of the plains behind you. That's a nice little setup there. I love that castle. I do. But I've got a serious question. Where did that mechanical monstrosity come from? Now, again, I've got a few theories and everything as to where it could have come from, and this might be just going down a similar thread that other people have discussed themselves. The question is, what? Consider the design of this mechanical crab that has an organic brain at its control. A single solitary eye. It looks like something from the Clone Wars era. It really does. It looks like something that one of the separatist factions would have built. And I have a theory as to who. Because there was one group in particular within the separatist factions that dealt with the melding of organic and technological organic matter and technology, and that's the Techno Union Guild. Now you might be asking, well, who was the Techno Union Guild? I don't remember what they were all about, but I can tell you, I'll give you one of the representatives, and that was Wat Tambor. Now, if you watch the Clone Wars animated series, he popped up a few times, but Wat Tambor was the one that had the mechanical cowl around his the biggest part of his neck, lower part of his mouth, and everything, and so on. And then he had the couplet, the eye covers that coupled over his eyes, and he had that voice modulator and everything. He was the one that had the kind of distorted voice inside the clones and everything when Dooku and all the other separatist leaders are talking about what they're going to do next and so on, and who's going to join and who isn't. And Watambor is the one that says the Techno Union Guild will join your cause. I get the impression that this was an experiment or it was a leftover from the Techno Union Guild. Now, how exactly this creature got there, I'm not entirely sure. Or if it was maybe a early prototype experiment. Once it exits that large crab-like exoskeleton and it's just on its own. Now, here's the thing that I thought for a minute and everything until it straightened up and walked on two legs. It had those quills on its back, and it reminded me of a Tuscan dog for just a minute there. So I thought maybe it was some sort of animal that had been jury rigged up that way, but it doesn't act like an animal. And it doesn't necessarily behave like an animal. There's intellect there. There's reasoning there. There's a conscience there. There's sentience there that just isn't animal sentience. It's humanoid sentience. And then it starts pumping the fluids or whatever it's pumping out of Den and everything into that little creepy looking boy that has that big cancer on the top of it. And actually pumping up and down, it's pumping the fluids out of Den. That's creepy as hell. I'm not gonna BS. That's creepy as hell. Of course, Grogu tries to come in, tries to save Daddy Mando. That doesn't work out. We do get a couple of nice scenes of seeing Bo-Katan actually in action, not just kind of standing around the background. Granted, we do see her fight at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian with the rescue. We see her in action there, but we get to see her solo in action between the Amaleks and that droid. Granted, she gets her hands on the Darksaber, which that's a handy little dude. You just have to learn how to control it. She kicks some ass. And I will say this for Kay Sackhoff. I don't know if she's doing all her own stunts or what the case may be, but if she is, she's moving pretty good for an older woman. So, but that for me is the really interesting thing about this season thus far is the fact that we're seeing more of Bo-Katan than I honestly expected. But I'm glad we're seeing more of her. And then, of course, she rescues Mando. She's like, "All right, fine. I'm going to take you to the mines, to the living waters." And of course, she has to bail. Man, now this is not Din's fault. This is not Mando's fault. He could not have expected the bottom of that pool or whatever it is to be fallen in. Couldn't have known that. As dark as it is there and how dark that water is, you can't really tell. If I still got fitting, and he just drops down and everything, she's like, "Oh crap, I gotta save him again." It happens. You get yourself in a jam. Thankfully, you got somebody there that can save your ass. And then, of course, we get the thing that everybody's been talking about the last few weeks, the fact that we actually saw a living mythosaur. And I don't know about you all, but I kept expecting that thing to pop out of the water while her and Den were catching the breath and Grogu was there with them. But it amazingly never did. But seeing a real live, well, not just seeing its skull, but actually seeing a mythosaur, anything in the flesh. CGI flesh, but flesh just the same. It was cool. It was legitimately cool. It was a cool thing to witness. Because aside from the Star Wars Holiday Special, we have never seen what we would have considered a mythosaur. that was a cool moment. And I think it was harkening back to what Cooley said in season one. It's harkening back to other lore that we all are familiar with, and it's, of course, obviously Din does his thing. He recited Creed, and now he's a Mandalorian again. And I will get into one other topic in regards to all of that that's kind of been interesting to me of the season thus far, at least from the first half. I want to see if I'll be interested to see if this theme carries on through the remainder of the season. But um, we come to episode 3, and we've got a episode that's not focused on Mando or Din or Grogu. Now, granted, they open up the episode and they end the episode, but in the middle here with episode 3, the convert, we get a picture into what is going on with the Republic and how they're dealing with um, refugees or people, former Imperials who have accepted amnesty into the New Republic. And we get reintroduced to a character that we've seen before, that of course being Dr. Pershing. Of course, we saw him in season 1, we saw him at the end of season 2, and we saw him a couple of times in season 2. Besides that, I think we saw a hologram of him at one point, and then we saw him in the flesh, obviously, at the end of season 2, but we haven't seen him since then. And he's gone through the amnesty program and everything, and he's working for the New Republic there on Coruscant. And I've got to say this, as a person who saw the prequels and saw how good Coruscant looked, and how good Coruscant looked in Andor, but seeing it from ground level, it really gives you a sense of the structure of the planet more so than what we've ever seen before. And I think we see the Monument Plaza and everything with the peak of Tiamat, the mountain, the only part of the surface, the organic surface, of course, that can actually be seen anymore. And they stuck very, very closely to the Ralph McQuarrie drawings and concept art that he did way back when and everything for the original trilogy concept art. And they nailed it. And you see all these little vendors, and we see these street performers and so on, and we see Pershing and Elia Kane, the from Moff Gideon's ship. And we see, Pershing, he's debating, I know my research would be of benefit to the Republic, but he's kind of stuck in this clerical job. This is what they've given him to do, and he's doing it, anything. He's not necessarily begrudging of it, but he's doing it. But throughout the course of the episode, him and Elia Kane and everything are talking with each other, and she keeps bringing up the research that he did, and he's like, you even see him at the opening and everything of that particular portion of the episode. He's giving a talk, as we call it here, and they call it in the Star Wars universe, on genetics research and cloning. And it's really, it's an interesting plot thread, because it's what he's passionate about, and we understand, we find out why he got into genetics and into cloning and so on. It's because he lost his mother due to a defective heart. She had some sort of heart condition that ended up killing her. And if they just been able to have basic cloning technology where you could clone people's organs, he could have potentially saved her life. And we find out that his mother was in fact a scientist herself. And he really, he dove headfirst, and he's working for the Empire, and then he comes to realize what the Empire is using his research and his knowledge for. As he said so eloquently, the ambitions of one man, Palpatine, obviously. And of course, obviously, later on down the road, Moff Gideon. And I know some people have had issues with that episode because it didn't focus on the Mandalorian. But I like to know the shape of the universe in which the characters I'm following, what it looks like. I mean, okay, let's take a step back from just a minute from discussing the Mandalorian, and let's talk about basic storytelling and narrative structure. I'll try and make this interesting. Let's say you decide you want to write a book. Could be any type of book, but let's say it's a science fiction story. And it takes place in this fictional universe or semi-fictional universe. Let's say it's science fiction fantasy like Star Wars, or it's future science fiction like Star Trek. You need to give the reader some idea of the shape of the world in which they're entering into. Now, granted, one of the things that people had an issue with, in particular because of the prequels, was all the talking and story building and all the meetings and so on. And even for a while there, I kind of had a gripe about that myself. But as I've gotten older and I've become more well informed about how to tell a cohesive and relatable and understandable story, you have to take some time and flesh out the world in which your story takes place. That's what episode 3, The Convert, does for The Mandalorian in particular. Because obviously we've met Dr. Pershing in the past. We had met Moff Gideon. We actually kind of find out what happened to Moff Gideon. We don't know if it's 100% on the level, but we hope so. Although it would kind of suck to see such a great villain taken out off screen. Essentially, granted, he did have a very satisfactory exit in season 2, but at the same time, any good villain you want to see more of, but you don't want that villain or that character to get oversaturated. You don't want too much of him, otherwise he loses his mystique as a villain or as a character. But back to the discussion on crafting narrative. You can have a slower pace. You can have a slower tone and tenor and everything for various parts of a story. Now, granted, episode 3 is not as action-packed as, say, episodes 1 and 2. That's a given. But you're not dealing with characters necessarily that are oriented to a lot of high-paced, high-energy action. Though, granted, there's that really cool set piece at the end of the episode where Pershing and Elia Kane and everything, they get into the scrap yards there on Coruscant where they're tearing apart all those. It kills me to say that they're decommissioning and deconstructing all of those Imperial Star Destroyers. Well, I'm thinking those are perfectly good ships, and you're decommissioning them and you're tearing apart when you could simply give them a new paint job, slap the New Republic insignia on them, and use them. Don't just trash them and junk them. That would be like taking a fully restored 1964 Ford Mustang convertible and it's in perfect pristine condition and putting it a compactor. You wouldn't do that. Just like you wouldn't do this to an Imperial Star Destroyer. These are top of the line ships. These were the backbone of the Imperial Navy of the Empire itself. Now you don't just toss something like that on the scrap heap. Are you dumb? And, I know there have been people who have made the comment, well, don't you know, Ambassador, the Mandalorian leads into the sequel trilogy and kind of setting stuff up. If you want to look at that way, sure. I don't necessarily look at it that way. I don't look at Mandalorian as leading into the sequel trilogy. I look at Mandalorian as in the aftermath of Return of the original trilogy. That's what I look at it as. Now, I know. That's the intention for a lot of the new properties. For all the shows, whether they're live action or animated, that are being put out by Lucasfilm and Disney. They're building out the universe that leads to the sequel trilogy. Fine. You all know how I feel about the sequel trilogy. Hate it. So, to quote a very wise man, from a certain point of view, The Mandalorian is not a precursor to the sequel trilogy. It is an epilogue to the original trilogy. There. That being said, obviously, we have that very controversial ending or anything with Dr. Pershing's story where he is sent off to be reconditioned, in a manner of speaking. They don't necessarily call it that, but that's it. But Elia is in there, Elia Kane, and while Pershing is in that device, she cranks it all the way up to maximum intensity and essentially raising his mind. Now I have to ask myself a question, and there's a lot to dig into here in terms of Elia Kane's behavior in episode 3. Because we see her at the start of the episode, she's walking into that. This is something I forgot to mention. And yes, I know it's an Easter egg, quite literally, considering the shape of the building. But it takes place in the same opera house where the now infamous scene between Sidious and Anakin takes place, where he tells them about Darth Plagueis and everything. But it's now Dr. Pershing giving a talk on genetics and cloning. She straightens the tunic of her uniform. That almost looks like something, because her uniform looks pristine as it is. Doesn't look crooked or anything. But it seems like something an Imperial officer would do. So I'm wondering, and this is something that a lot of other people have discussed as well. What if her reprogramming or her reacclimation to working within the New Republic didn't take as well as everybody suspected? I mean, she says all the right things. That sounds like somebody that's working with the New Republic and happy to do so. But what if she is still, in her heart and her mind, still Imperial? Because here's the other thing. At the end of the episode, just before they are getting ready to hook Pershing into that machine, actually, no, it's right at the end of the episode. She straightens her tunic again. It's just a little visual cue that makes you want to think, what if she isn't all that she appears? What if she still has some holdover thoughts and ideas about being a member of the Empire? I can't say for sure, yay or nay, one way or the other, because obviously we don't know if we'll ever see either Pershing or her again. We don't know anything what's going to happen later on in the season yet. But it's one of those things. Is she still in contact with individuals within the Empire, or is she just acting on her own? That's the real question. Is she worried that the knowledge in Pershing's head is too dangerous to get out to anybody? Now, that's another theory as well. But we'll just have to wait and see. It's one of those things we just don't know. And then, of course, the episode does close with Dan bringing Bo-Katan into the covert and everything, the Mandalorian covert where the armor and her bunch and Paz Vizsla had been hanging out. And Din's like, I've been to the Living Waters. I got dunked. And Bo's like, I am witness. I have seen it. He did do this. And he's got that flask of water that he brought with him. Excuse me. And she's like, okay, well, you're Mandalorian again. The armor's like, you're back. You're good again. You're clean. Everything. Welcome back to the crew. And the armor asks Bo, well, you got submerged too, didn't you, when you were saving him? She's like, yep. She's like, have you removed your helmet? She's like, nope. She's like, well, then you can stay with us for as long as you want. But at the end of the episode, we see Bo staring at the mythosaur signet on the wall there in the cavern where the armorer has her forge and all her equipment set up. Which, of course, brings us to episode 4. What was the title of episode 4? Oh, right, the Foundling. Had to think for a minute. And this is okay, I don't want to say it's a fetch quest, but it is sort of, because they're trying to save Pre Vizsla's son, Ragnar, when he gets snatched by that giant lizard bird, for lack of a better name. And we see the Mandalorians training. We see the younger, the adolescent, the children Mandalorians, them training, and Din wants Grogu to start training as well. Wants him to train as the Mandalorians do. And they're like, well, has he spoken the creed? She's like, one cannot speak if one doesn't understand, because, well, thus far Grogu has not spoken. And okay, we might as well just address the elephant in the room. Yes, Grogu does jump over that kid. Yes, Grogu does land 3 shots in succession. Yes, Grogu has force ability and is able to jump like that. Does it look ridiculous? Not more so than anything else we've seen in Star Wars. I mean, we all remember the scene where Yoda fights Count Dooku. We've seen the scene where Yoda fights the Emperor. Yeah, granted, it's not CGI; it's a practical effect. Could have maybe been done CGI. Okay, yeah, maybe. but it was perfectly serviceable. And it's perfectly reasonable to assume that Grogu could land 3 perfect shots on Ragnar and win the duel, win the training bout. Because essentially, Grogu is a 50-year-old baby. Well, maybe 51 at this point. But there's one aspect of this episode that I do want to address in this, and I honestly, I will admit full transparency. When the credits of this episode popped up and a particular name popped up, I was like, that was him. And of course, we're all talking about the Gungan in the room. That's, of course, Ahmed Best, the actor who portrayed Jar Jar Binks in the prequel trilogy. But we finally learned who saved Grogu during Order 66 and the attack on the Jedi Temple. It wasn't R2. It wasn't Mace Windu. It wasn't anybody we knew. It was a seemingly random Jedi Master by the name of Kelleran Beck. And I am not going to lie. I watched this episode the second time. And I was like, holy crap. Ahmed, it is good to see you again. And I mean that most sincerely. It was a real treat to see Ahmed Best back in Star Wars again. I just hope it's not the last time we see him. But anyway, getting into that particular sequence, we see a pair of Jedi Knights get Grogu into a turbo into an elevator with and everything, get him to Kelleran, and he's like, "Hold on, kid, I'm gonna get you out of here." And of course, we see clones coming in left and right, and Kelleran's got 2 lightsabers, and he's blocking blaster bullets left and right back at the clones, taking out clones here left and right, and just being a complete and total badass. And this is a Jedi you'd want in your corner to save your butt if your butt's if your bacon's burning. And that's a plain stone cold fact. And I sincerely and earnestly hope this is not the last time we see this character. Now, we don't know if he survived Order 66. We don't know where him and Grogu end up or anything. But I do want to discuss the remainder of that sequence. Obviously, you see a pair of gunships firing at Kelleran and Grogu and their speeder. And I'll say this, I did not know that they had speeders with sidecars. And I won't lie, that's kind of badass. I kind of want one now myself. Okay, for those of you who remember, when I did my review of season 2, we met Cobb Vanth, I think played by Timothy Olyphant, and he had that speeder that was essentially a pod racer engine with a seat attached to the side, and it looked like the exact same type of speeder or pod racer engine that Anakin used. For the love of heaven, Hasbro, do a black series of that freaking speeder with Cobb Vanth on it. I want it. I will happily give you my money. Give me that give me Cobb Vanth speeder from season 2 of Mandalorian with him on it. But also, give me the other speeder with the sidecar on it. And Kelleran Beck and Grogu in his little hover pod. That was kick-ass as all hell. Give me these things. You got the stuff? Make it. But Kelleran's coming in to a landing platform. Now, at first, when I saw that ship, it looked almost like Padme's ship that she used in Attack of the Clones. Wait a minute. Because what did her, no? Because the one that she used in Revenge of the Sith looked different. That had to be someone, because those were Naboo guards. That was the same model ship that Padme had in Attack of the Clones. That's the ship she used. Except the chrome finish looked just a little bit duller. Granted, it was at night, so that might be why. But the question is, how did Kelleran know that ship was there, and who was been in contact with between whoever that ship belongs to and the people at the Jedi Temple? That's the question I have. Yeah, because the one that Padme had in Revenge of the Sith it was smaller, but it still had the wide wings on it, or the air fins, whatever you want to call it. That's gonna bother me until we figure out where it came from. But the one thing I wanted to mention is how they triggered that flashback with Grogu when he's sitting there watching the armorer using her forge, and she's got that piece of Beskar plate and everything hanging and everything, and it's being pounded by that impact hammer. And you can almost, I'll say it, I think they've actually done some upgrading with Grogu, the puppet for Grogu. There, they've done some CGI enhancement for his face. One of the two. Neither one would surprise me. But there's a lot more expression. There's a lot more flexibility in his face than there was in the past. And I can't lie, I like that fact and everything, because Grogu's more of a central character now in the show. Which has led people to think that maybe that Din Djarin isn't the Mandalorian, that maybe Grogu is, which is entirely possible. Who knows? Or it could be Din, for all we know. I don't think it's Bo. Though I think Bo Katan has a part to play in the story ultimately, or they wouldn't still have her around. But I don't think she's the Mandalorian per se. Obviously, she is a Mandalorian, but I don't think she is the Mandalorian. But again, I digress. Armor makes that next piece of armor for Grogu and everything. It's that piece of plate and everything with the Mud Hornet signet and everything on it. And of course, during the other part of the episode, I kind of forgot. Didn't forget, just hadn't gotten to it. Where they're going to save Pre Vizsla's son Ragnar from that lizard bird. They get back. They save Ragnar and so on. And unfortunately, Bo loses a piece of armor, and armor's like, "Well, I can make you a replacement piece or anything." And Bo asks anything, "Can I have the mythosaur signet on that piece?" And the armorer's like, "Of course, all Mandalorians have right to that signet. It's part of our culture." Because Bo's also a night owl, because she's got the night owl on her design on her helmet, on her other palindrome, her other shoulder protector. But that brings me to Bo herself. Excuse me. Bo, I don't want to say she's been acting suspiciously, but I have to ask the question. Is she blending in or acclimating to the group? Or is she potentially seeking to take over the group? Because remember what she says to Din in episode 1 of this season. Because she didn't come back with the Darksaber, everybody left. And she's like, go wave it in front of them and they'll follow you wherever they'll do whatever you tell them to do, essentially. So I really got to ask the question: is she wanting to be part of this group, or is she wanting to take it over for her own ends? Because somebody who comes that close to getting the dark saber and it's slipping through their fingers isn't just going to give up. It's not in Bo's nature by any stretch. And I have to wonder, is she planning to make a play for the dark saber again? And if so, the question is when. Because she keeps staring at that Mandalorian signet. And is she realizing all the mistakes that were made in the past? Because when her and Din are down there in the ruins um of Mandalore, the Mandalorian city, you can sense the heartbreak in the fact that her father died defending the city from the Empire. She's still in her heart Mandalorian, even if she's not part of that particular faction. So, and do want to say hello to the chat to a dear old friend I haven't seen in a while, DJ Odyssey. DJ, it is good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you being here tonight. So, and let's see what you got to say, old man. And I say that as a term of endearment, not as an insult. He's like, I think she realizes her mistakes and wants to follow instead of lead. It's possible. She might be trying to acclimate in because she realizes it's her best chance to survive. Again, time will tell. We'll have to see. Because she wielded the dark saber way too easily in episode 2. Way, way, way too easily. It was like it just fit in her hand. It belonged to her. She used it so effortlessly. Whereas Din, every time he activates the thing, it just sinks to the gosh dang ground. And it's a struggle for to use it. I mean, Moff Gideon uses it just fine. Bo Katan uses it just fine. But Din can't use it. Oh, shut up, Deej. You and I both know Kay Sackhoff is a good looking woman. So just don't be fronting. You know when I know that Katie Sackhoff is Bo-Katan. She looks good for her age. So just shut up. No, she isn't. I don't get it. Well, if you don't get it, I'm not going to explain it to you because you're a lot older than me, Deej, and you should know. Stubborn old coot. Perfectly good, attractive woman, or anything. You know it, I know it, everybody else and their mother knows it. Well, okay, let's say it this way. You know it, I know it, and everybody else and their uncle, everybody's uncle knows it. So just cut it out, Deej. I'm not saying you have to stand for her or anything, or just have to be like obsessed with her, but just don't give me this BS. She looked good back in BSG as well, Deej. And no, Boomer was not hotter. Because I know who you're talking about, and Kay Sackhoff as Starbuck or Kara Thrace. She is just how she is now. So just get out of here with that nonsense, Boomer. Boomer, my ass. The only Boomer here is you. Crusty old fossil. But anyway, getting away from, because I have to choose my words carefully now because you're in here, Deej. Not saying that like a bad thing. You're still old and crusty, so shut up. And so am I. I'm Gen X too, and you darn well know it. Anyway, there was one other thing I wanted to discuss, and now I realize this may be kind of on the nose, but some things in life are. These episodes so far of season 3 have had a particular theme, at least in regards to, well, no, even episode 4 in terms of the little bit that we see Din and Bo and everything in that episode. But you have episode 1, The Apostate. You have episode 2, The Mines of Mandalore. You have episode 3, The Convert, and episode 4, you have The Foundling. Now, apostasy is not a term that most people are familiar with. It is primarily a religious term, particularly within Christianity, regardless of if it's Protestant or Catholic. An apostate is someone who has lost their way or denied particular aspects of their faith, or broken some sort of canon law and are considered apostate within the eyes of the denomination or the faith. And that's why they refer to Din as an apostate, because he removed his helmet, and according to them, Mandalorians never remove their helmet except when they're by themselves to eat. That's it. Well, I imagine there's a few other times when a Mandalorian would remove their helmet. But thus far, season 3, okay. And then, of course, you've got episodes 3 and episodes 4. One term, The Convert, the next, and episode 4, The Foundling. The Foundling is not necessarily a religious term, although it could be interpreted as such. But looking at episode 2 in particular, The Mines of Mandalore, Din has to bathe or be submerged in the living waters of the Mines of Mandalore to be considered cleansed of his transgressions. For those of you that have any knowledge or who are of the Christian faith, again, whether it's Protestant or Catholic, one of the rites of the Christian faith is to be baptized. The use of these different ideas and the symbolism and imagery is not lost on me, and I'm hoping it's not just me that it's not lost on. Because if you look at it, this season thus far has been Din trying to reacclimate back into the Mandalorian culture. I mean, he's been off on his own. He had his quest to get Grogu back to the Jedi, which obviously he did. They were able to Grogu made contact with Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker came and saved him, went off and helped him rediscover his abilities and powers within the Force. And then Grogu decided, hey, I want to go back and be with Din and everything. That's where I belong. And the season has been Din trying to get back in with the group. And now that Grogu's with him, trying to get Grogu to acclimate into the culture as well. These are themes, everything. Now, the term of foundling, like I said, isn't necessarily a religious theme or a religious construct by any stretch, but it could be seen that way. Because someone who finally comes to the faith can be considered a foundling. And you go from a foundling to a convert, or a convert could be a person that comes from one faith into another, kind of like myself. And for those, just a little bit of context on my personal life. most you know, I am a devout Christian, and up until recently, a devout Protestant Christian. But after a lot of the short version, I have decided, and I'm going through the process of joining the Catholic Church. There, long and short, done. With that episode, with episode 3, The Convert, Elia Kane is not the only convert in that episode. So is Bo-Katan. And I do want to say hello to the chat before I progress any further to another old friend I have not seen in a very long time, LDG of Geeks Enjoy Nerdrotica and LDG of Free the Net. Whatever moniker he goes by, LDG. Cheers. Good to see you, buddy. There are a few things better than a Sonic Cherry Limeade. Just saying. My little endorsement for something I like personally. But I think them using and I respect you for that, LDG. Hope you enjoy. Hope you're doing okay, buddy. It's been a long time. I miss you. So, oh, shut up, DJ. Nobody's stalking you. You're too damn hideous and ugly to be stalked. And for those who are wondering, me and DJ talk about, and me and DJ and LDG talk like this to each other all the time. So don't take it as me being malicious or mean to being to Deej or LDG, either one. Well, that's your prerogative. Well, considering as much as he sits on it, LDG, it'd be hard to miss. But, anyway, getting back on track here. The whole concept of using religious terminology and symbolism and so on for this season, I think is a really good move and everything, or it's a good storytelling dynamic and everything. It's a good solid idea because Dan and also Grogu and also Bo-Katan, they're all in their own way trying to acclimate either back into or acclimate to for the very first time, or acclimate period, that in that case it being Grogu, into Mandalorian society or into Mandalorian culture. And it's not, it kind of goes back to a video I did a couple of years ago now, and the concept of religious, with big quotation marks, religion or religious belief in the Star Wars universe. Because if you remember in the book of Boba Fett, when Mando's going to Tatooine, and that droid says no weapons are allowed on board, and he's like, weapons are part of my religion. There's an expression. There isn't the freedom of religious expression in the Star Wars universe, and I have a problem with that. He's a Mandalorian. He should be allowed to carry his weapons with him. But no, he has to check them because, well, bureaucracy is stupid. Particular bureaucracy in the Star Wars universe. I mean, for heaven's sakes, look what happened to the Old Republic. The whole war was started because of taxation. I mean, okay, we had our own war over taxation, but that was different. Although the whole Civil War, the whole Clone Wars, why exactly it happened, wasn't fully fleshed out all that well. Although we know who started the war, that of course being Sidious, aka Palpatine, and we obviously know the ultimate end was for him to take over the universe. Okay, fine. Take over the Republic. Okay, groovy. Whatever. we never really got a good sense of why the Clone Wars popped off in the first place. But again, I digress. All I'm essentially saying is so far with season 3, them using terminology and symbolism from religious belief, particularly Christianity, I dig it. It's a good thing. It's a good way to engage the audience because, okay, I'm a Star Wars fan, but I'm also a Christian. A Catholic Christian, not Protestant no more. I got tired of all those Protestant denominations kicking me in the teeth and telling me I wasn't good enough because I wasn't born into the club. With the Catholics, oh, hey, okay, you have to take a class, you have to do your confession, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and then guess what? You're Catholic, and you can be Catholic for life until you decide you don't want to no more. It won't happen for me. I'm Catholic till either I die or the good Lord comes back, whichever happens first. But I think it's a really, I don't know if I would necessarily call it a gutsy move per se, but I will say that it was a good narrative idea, considering the themes of season 3 to go this route. There is one other thing I do want to address, and it's honestly a minor thing, and that's the run times for the episodes. They've been just a smidgen on the short side. But at the same time, you don't want to overstay your welcome, and you don't necessarily want to drag on an episode. You don't want a bunch of padding. But until he comes back, Hammy, okay, stop laughing so hard. It makes me feel bad. Really, stop laughing. If you're talking about Jesus coming back, Deej, I am not amused. Not amused. I'm going to pray for you. Say a couple of Hail Marys so you... Okay, I shouldn't say that mockingly because this is my religion and I take it seriously. Okay, I will say this seriously. I'm going to pray that your soul ends up in purgatory so that you can learn a valuable lesson about faith. I'm not saying you have to go to bed. You don't have to go to bed just because your jokes aren't any good, or the majority of your jokes aren't any good. I don't want you to feel guilty. It's not what religion's about. It's about having hope. Trust me, I know. Yes, because here's the thing. God doesn't send people to purgatory. Okay, excuse me. God does send people to purgatory. God doesn't send people to hell. They decide themselves to renounce God and end up going there. They go to hell. Purgatory isn't the place of punishment. Purgatory is a place of education. You learn to be better. And then you're able to work off all the sins that you did in life, and then you get to go to heaven. Yes, it sounds convoluted, but you know what I say? Do I necessarily believe in purgatory, or do I believe in the idea of purgatory as necessarily a place? It could be a place. Who's to say? Who am I to say it isn't? Fine, because here's the thing. I can take anything and tie it back into the main topic. Because let's look at it this way. Ever since Din took off his helmet, he has been in a kind of purgatorial state. He can't get back into the Mandalorian cell that he was a part, covert that he was a part of. So he has to go on a journey of redemption. That's kind of what purgatory is a journey through a place to redeem your soul so that you're worthy to go up. See what I did there? And you have so little faith, Deej. As a very wise and holy man once said, "O ye of little faith." That guy's name was Jesus. And he was a really, really righteously cool guy. See, that's how you make a religious joke, Jeej. Get it? Righteously cool. Anyway, overall, season 3 has been off to a very solid start. I have very much enjoyed up to this point. We got 4 episodes to go. After this week, we'll have 3 episodes to go. And I'm very hopeful. Thus far, they have not let us down. Okay. All right, I'm bringing up your question here, Deej. Hang on. I do have one question, though, about the show. Was it just me, or was it dumb that the bird had the kid in its mouth for 2 days? Not if it took it longer than we think to get back to its nest. Because even though it could fly, it have to eventually rest. And even carrying Ragnar in his mouth would still be a bit tiresome. That probably plopped him down on the ground, put all of its body weight on top of him, and looked at him and said, "You're not going anywhere. You're going back to my kiddos to be dinner." So, I mean, you could look at it as potentially dumb, sure, if you want to. I may have to rewatch the episode again because I'm a little sketchy on the time frame. I thought it wasn't that long for them to get there, per se. I don't know. I mean, she followed it to its nest. That's how she knew where it was. It then took 2 days for them to get to and up into the nest. Well, if that nest was on the opposite side of the planet, it could take that long. I mean, even flying and everything, yeah, because they decided that they would be best to approach the nest at sunrise and everything for the element of surprise. Because if you think about where that nest is situated, Deej, if they hit that nest right when the sun crests over the horizon, it can give them the element of surprise or anything by blinding that bird, that lizard bird. So, yeah. For me, it's a of the episode. I mean, for me, obviously, the main focus of the episode wasn't so much them saving Ragnar, although that is an important part, but it's more so Grogu's acclamation into the rest of the group. That's where the focus is. That was just kind of a fun little action set piece, a little side adventure and everything um, for the rest of the episode. So, well, that's really hard. I mean, although I've heard people absolutely gushing about Picard, but I, you know, short tangent here. I never got heavily into New Trek. That being Discovery or Strange New Worlds or Picard or anything like that. I just never had the interest. For me, Star Trek ended with, well, for me, my main exit point was when Voyager ended. I watched a little bit of Enterprise, wasn't my thing, so I haven't been as invested or upset with the direction of New Trek and everything that everybody else who's more of a hardcore fan than I am is. You don't like Picard, you don't like Discovery, you haven't liked any of those shows. Okay, fine, that's your prerogative. I mean, the same is even true with the Star Wars shows. You don't like Mando, you didn't like Clone Wars, you haven't liked Rebels, you didn't like Andor, you didn't like Book of Boba Fett, you're not gonna like Ahsoka, you're not gonna like this or that or the other. Okay, fine. You're not gonna like the Acolyte. It's no skin off my back if you don't like something. I want to watch it and judge it on its own merits and on my own counsel. Why another wise man once said, "My counsel I will keep on what is well." Yeah, Deej, same here. So, but you know, a bit of a digression for just a minute. You know, I've been away for a little while. I'll be the first to admit I haven't been streaming as regularly as I used to. I've had a lot of change go on the first few months of 2023 and everything. Issues with my back, new jobs, and so on and everything. But I've still kept my eye and ear on social media and on YouTube. And I may clip this part out when this stream finalizes, or I may leave it in. But something I have noticed in the discourse on social media in particular, and to a degree on YouTube as well, which I guess could also be considered social media also, is this constant bickering back and forth about the state of Star Wars, the state of Star Trek, the state of DC, the state of Marvel. And yes, I know what happened with Jonathan Majors yesterday. Am I going to comment on it? No, because I don't particularly care. Hopefully, things get sorted out with him and he's still able to play Kang. I don't want to see him go to jail. I don't want to see that happen to him. I don't want him to see him have any bad press because he seems like a decent guy. I know I'm not just saying that because I like him because for a part that he's currently playing. I hope this whole situation with the assault charge gets sorted out. It could turn out to be a complete misunderstanding. Wouldn't be the first time. But I digress back to the original point I had. A long time ago, about a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit longer, I decided I was done fighting everybody else's war. I was done being a part of everybody else's campaign. I was done getting embroiled in a bunch of needless drama. Which is why you don't see me on certain channels no more. Which is why I just kind of keep my head down and I plug along and do what I'm doing here. Now, if that means that my channel grows slower, okay, fine, it grows slower. That's my call. That's my path. That's my way of doing things. But I have gotten to the point where I am seriously exhausted from all the negative criticism and nothing but. You want to critique? Fine. That's what I'm doing here. But for the love of heaven, critique honestly and critique authentically. Don't put on an act, don't put on an accent, don't put on a mask or a helmet. Come out and say what you think and what you feel and leave it at that. Because all of this hand wringing and all of this fake outrage and all this fake anger is just tiresome. I have not been a Star Wars fan for the better part of my life just to listen to a bunch of self absorbed half-wits complain and whine because something doesn't match the canon that Lucas created. Yeah, LDG, exactly. And I don't care if I lose subs. I don't care if I lose followers. I'm either going to start muting people or I'm just going to start a flat dab unfollowing because I'm just sick and tired of everybody painting these creatives as the boogeyman or as some horrible, terrible person because they create a story or a character that they don't like. It's a show, it's a movie. For the love of, I say this with all sincerity and no blasphemy whatsoever, for the love of God, if your entire existence is wrapped up in a fictional universe, then you need to take a long, hard look at yourself and your life and reevaluate it. Because I am in my mid 40s, and, and as I said a few minutes ago, I am done fighting someone else's war, well, faux war, and I am done campaigning for everybody else's want or whatever the case. I'm just done. I just want to watch the shows I enjoy. I want to talk about them with my friends. And I just want to go, and when I turn the camera off at the end, I just want to live my life. That's the long and short of it. If the ambassadorial way never becomes some big huge channel, okay, fine. No skin off my back. If I'm never able to do YouTube full time, okay, fine. So skin off my back. Would it be kind of cool? Yeah, maybe. But at the same time, it'd be a heck of a lot more pressure. Some people, that's what they want. Then chase that dream. Absolutely, positively chase that dream. You want to be a full-time YouTuber? Do so with my support and with my blessing, particularly if I consider you a friend. But for me, it's a hobby. It's something fun that I do with my friends when they're able to be here. Obviously, tonight it's just been me. And that's fine if it's just me. It started off with just me. And like I said, some of you may or may not have noticed for a while now, there have been channels I have not been on because I decided to part ways with those channels or those that were a part of them. And that was my call and my choice. I wasn't going to get anybody else involved because it wasn't warranted to do so. This is my walk, my journey, my deal. I consult two people. Man Ambassador and the Almighty. And that may sound like a weird way to run a YouTube channel, and maybe sound like a weird way to order your life. But I've been doing it all these years, and so far it has not steered me wrong. But I'm just... Most of you know me. Most of you know my backstory because I've shared a good fair part of it here. I grew up in a world, much like DJ and LDG did, where the internet didn't even exist. Social media wasn't even a thing. You wanted to be social? You went a couple of streets over in your neighborhood and you hung out with your friends. Or they came over to your house. Or you hung out at school or whatever. There wasn't all of this technology. And, I've shared this clip before. It's a speech from The Great Dictator starring Charlie Chaplin. And there's one line in particular in that speech that really resonates, particularly now. We have developed speed and we have shut ourselves in. The radio and the airplane have drawn us closer together. Well, in this particular concept, the webcam and the internet have brought us closer together, but they have also walled us in to a degree. Because everybody's over here in this click, and everybody's over here in that click, and everybody in this click doesn't talk to everybody in this click because somebody in the opposite click said or did something that the other people in the other click don't like. Yeah, the one from The Great Dictator, LDG. So I would play here, but I'm worried I would get a copyright claim probably. So, or maybe you're just saying the Charlie Chaplin speech, and yes, you're correct. It's from The Great Dictator. And, back in the old days when I was in school and LDG and DJ, and probably a lot of you that'll catch us on the replay or whoever catches us on the replay. Yeah, I know. But thankfully, I have a good memory and I can reference it without a clip. Back in the good old days, if we had a problem with another person, we settled it this way or we settled it this way. We either punched it out or we talked it out. And nowadays, that doesn't happen. Now, one click doesn't like the other one. The other click does everything they can to destroy that other click. One click doesn't like what another one has to say or who they hang out with. They threaten them. One click has a few people in it that are just rotten, scummy people, and the rest of the clique won't say or do anything about it. And it causes the other clique to completely and utterly disconnect from them. And feelings are hurt, and lines are drawn, and it's just a mess. You know, I generally don't talk about this stuff. I generally completely stay keep this type of discourse off my channel because I don't talk drama. But someone that I did and still do regard as a good friend who hasn't been on here in a very long time, and no, I don't hold it against him. Some of you know him, some of you have watched his channel, you may even be subscribed to him, and that's, of course, the Point Extra Lounge. Enosh. I met Enosh about 2 years ago through a former acquaintance. Now, I mean very former. And I'll go into that as well. Might as well. It's 2 years in the review mirror anyway. Enosh put a thread out on his Twitter account saying that he was, at least for a time or maybe permanently, leaving YouTube, except for his Sunday morning streams from his church. And I was saddened by that. I mean, he admits that he let some things get in the way, and he kind of lost track of why he had his channel in the first place, and that was for his family and for his nerd family, as he calls it. And I have a lot of respect for Enosh. Always have, always will. I don't just not just because we're very close in age and because we both like the same things, and not just because we're both brother Christians. Granted, Protestant, Catholic, but because even despite his faults, and he does have some, Enosh is a good man. But I found out something a few weeks ago that really, really bothered me. And I know maybe I shouldn't because it's not necessarily tied to me, but when you care about your friends, you care about them, and that's it. And I'm a former associate, and that's how I refer to him as an associate, not a friend, not a colleague, an associate. Mad Max of Movie Madness Entertainment. And I did some digging in, and I found out what exactly the whole scuttlebutt was about. And essentially, Max was going to platform someone that Enosh believed, and I don't think without undue cause, tried to extort or blackmail a member of Enosh's family. And Max did, in fact, platform this person. Granted, it was for only one time, as I understand it, because I don't watch Max's channel anymore. I don't go over to Max's channel anymore because I made a decision on my own of my anything because something happened about a year and a half ago, give or take, that caused me to say I can no longer, in good conscience, continue to associate with Max and channel. And it has, considering what has happened recently, I believe I made the right decision. And if this somehow gets back to Max or whatever, I don't particularly care if it does or not. I stand by what I said to him privately just as much then as I do now. I know I won't repeat what I said to him privately. Be as to say, there is a way to treat your friends, and there's a way to not treat your friends. And the way that Max treats those that he calls his friends is absolutely scummy. And I want no further part of it. And that's the long and short of it. Now, from what I understand, this whole situation developed further and affected further people aside from just Enosh, but those that are connected to Enosh as well, though on a different, in a different situation. And I won't go into the situation here because it's really not warranted. But be as to say, I feel bad that a fellow YouTuber has decided to pretty much just step away, whether it's permanently or temporarily from his YouTube channel. Because while I don't always agree with everything that Enosh had to say in terms of particular topics, I always respected him as a friend. And it is a shame that I will no longer get to hear his takes on Star Wars or Marvel or DC or whatever he decides to talk about. It's sad to see someone that you regard as a friend be hurt and not necessarily be able to do anything about it except express yourself verbally, whether that be by a DM or by this. So if this does get back to you, Enosh, I want you to know much like the Mandalorians that are scared throughout the Star Wars universe, there'll be a place for you here. Whether it's at the lounge or it's at the wing. This fellow geek will be waiting for you if you decide to come back. And this brother Christian, granted from a different branch of the denomination of Christendom, will pray for you earnestly that you have a good life, a peaceful one, and a prosperous one. Because that is the way. Pun intended. Anyhow, enough of the heartfeltness and everything. Hey, George, good to see you, buddy. I have not had a chance to see John Wick, but I have heard nothing but good things. I will say this briefly. I am going to go. Yeah, I know, George. I remember. But you know what? Like I said, we'll keep a light on for him. And his brother Mandalorians will be waiting for him to come home, no matter how long it may be. So, but I am eventually gonna go. I first need to watch the first 3 John Wicks. I've watched John Wick 1. I almost feel like at this point I need to rewatch it, and I need to watch John Wick 2 and 3 before I go see John Wick 4 and everything. But I've heard nothing but good things about John Wick 4, and I'm glad a lot of people are enjoying it. Um, a few notes and everything before I do wrap up here. For those of you who might be wondering, why not all the new reviews except for maybe like streaming stuff? One is a question of time, two is a question of funds and everything. Um, I'm having to kind of, no, we're not in dire financial distress or anything, but I have started a new job, and you have to budget. You have to pick what you're going to go see. In terms of reviews for new movies, the ones I have on slate right now, for sure, is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, potentially Across the Spider-Verse, and most definitely Dune Part 2. Now, as far as any other films this year, I will have to kind of play those by ear. I do have a lot of retro and modern reviews set up and everything are planned out. I just gotta, essentially set up the streams. As I mentioned on my social media, for those of you who do follow me on, Instagram and Twitter and everything, I'm I'm do streaming slash video model because I am going to get back to doing short, well, not super short, but short video reviews and everything of various movies and so on. And I am still planning on doing reviews for the Orville for the first 3 seasons and everything. Now, if there's a season 4, okay, great. It's just a question of making the time to do it. That's the long and short of it, guys. I'm working nights right now. Now, granted, it's not as late as my previous job where I was working overnights and having to sleep during the day, which sucked me on the telling, believe me, not to mention it was killing my back. But the other reason I'm not streaming every week with a review is I like this format better, at least for me. I like being able to talk about a group of episodes rather than just one, because you can have a lot more discussion. And George, that's a good idea. I think because let's give you all an idea, and I'm gonna be uploading stuff onto my community tab here on the channel and on my Instagram and on my I'm going to be doing review series for the Oceans movies. That's Oceans 11, 12, and 13. I'm going to be planning a couple of double feature reviews and everything with some friends and everything for this is an older movie, but it's a movie that is from the 90s that I really enjoyed. It stars Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington, called Virtuosity. I'm also going to be doing a review of Crimson Tide and Enemy of the State. I think another pair of movies that I really love. There's another review series. I just can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I'll have to look through my thumbnails again. One that's going to be coming out later this summer and everything in celebration of Man Ambassador's birthday. We're going to be doing a review series for the Hunger Games movies or anything, because I love Hunger Games. She loves Hunger Games. And I found out that a few friends of mine and everything also love Hunger Games, so they're probably going to want in on this as well. So I do have content planned out, folks. I'm just having to schedule it and everything differently around my new work schedule. Um, I am going to be streaming on Sundays and everything. Obviously, it will be after I get home from mass, church and everything. Afternoons with the ambassador is going to be coming back as I have the time to do it, and so on. But like I said, I'm gonna update y'all on this on my social media because that's what the social media is there for, to interact with y'all that way. Good to hear that, George. Truly, yeah. Because isn't that when I think that's when that prequel comes out or anything? The Hunger Games prequel. That's when that comes out in like October or November somewhere. November. Thank you, honey. She's a few woman of few words, but when she speaks, people listen. Yours truly. So, but do expect a review at the end of season 3 of The Mandalorian. Everything that will be coming up in a few weeks. I will be doing obviously a review of Ahsoka, everything which is supposed to come out later this year as well. So, and I know I should not feel guilty about this, but I do. I know I hit 500 subscribers back a couple of months ago, and I still have not done my 500 subscriber stream as a celebration stream as of yet. I'm going to get a hold of LDG so he can set up a watch along for Galaxy Quest for me. Anything. If LDG you're still here, I'll be in touch with you, bud. Anything. I will try and plan that stream for at the latest next month. Oh, LDG, you're still here. Okay. LDG, you went quiet on me. I don't know if you're ever here. If you're still here, if you left. But and I'm also gonna, I need to mull this over, but I think at least once a month. Okay. Gotcha, bud. You're fine. I think at least once a month we're gonna do a watch along for something. I might do a poll, I might do a post or whatever on Twitter or wherever, and give you all an option. Say, here's 3 movies. Which one you want to do a watch along for? And we'll work out the logistics. Looking at you, LDG, buddy. So, but anyways, I know I've kind of gone off on a big old tangent towards the end of the stream tonight. I didn't really plan on it, but you know what? I had some things I wanted to say. This was as good a time as any to say them. But anyways, so anyways, folks, I am going to get off of here. But I want to thank all of you who did tune in tonight. I do want to thank DJ Odyssey, LDG, the George, anybody else who was lurking in the chat, whether it was on Twitch or Twitter or YouTube, whatever the case may be. Thank you for being here tonight. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. And we'll see you next time. And I will say this, and I've tried to rework this and everything in a way that works, that says what I have always been wanting to say. So I will say it succinctly. Be respectful. Be excellent to each other. And most of all, party on, dudes! And if you do all those things, you will always be counted as an ambassador and be part of the ambassadorial wing. Peace.